Iowa State plays football in 4 days, and we finally have some clarity on who is going to be starting for Iowa State, or at least something very close to it. We're going to talk about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform. We have 4 days to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Be sure to hit that button and help us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state before this season gets started, because it is so close. It's so close, in fact, that we actually got our first depth chart for Iowa State, Kansas State. So we're going to break that down, probably go offense, we'll go defense, talk about some players that I think are still worth looking forward to playing, even if they're really listed on that depth chart, some notable players. But there are players that I think are worth actually talking about that made it onto the depth chart as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about Drake Toll and Locked On Big 12. Put out some rankings. I think their final season predictions for the Big 12, and it's just blatant disrespect for Iowa State. So we're going to talk about what that looks like, and where I think he's wrong. Like, he's not right. He just is not right. So that's going to be exciting. Stick around for that at the end. But let's dive into this depth chart that has been released for Iowa State football against Kansas State. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. I do think the defense is probably a little bit more exciting. So we're going to knock out this offensive side, because I think for the most part, we've got this relatively ironed out. I don't think anybody's shocked. Rocco Becht named the starter. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. This doesn't really need a lot of explaining. This wasn't something that was ever even like a thought that this wouldn't be the case. We were all on the same page. This was never even, I mean, he was trying to get pulled from Iowa State to the SEC. So it's like, yeah, of course he was going to start. The only reason he wouldn't start was probably due to some sort of injury or off the field issue. And thankfully, he's listed at number 1. Alex Mansky following him up, and then Connor Moberly in there as well. 2 guys that I think are very capable. Obviously, Alex Mansky, the freshman at 6'3", 225, and that is an or there between Mansky and Moberly. You're going to hear that a little bit throughout this depth chart. There are some ors on here. I think probably, at quarterback, that's not anything that I'm going to read into too much. I think that's just like, we know it's Rocco. We'll figure out who it is if it's not Rocco, kind of when we figure it out. I imagine they've got a plan, but it's not really that necessary, especially right now. If you're putting or on there, it doesn't really give the opponent too much, to who's really game planning for Alex Mansky or Connor Moberly in this game. I would say, I almost said Twitter. I would say Twitter would agree with me. I don't know why that word came to my mind, but I don't think Kansas State's doing that. So nonetheless, we can move on from quarterback. Rocco, our starter. Running back, Carson Hansen listed 1, Abusama 2, and then at that 3 spot, Dylan Lee or Aiden Flora. Notably, no River Peppers on this list as of yet. Could be changing, could be moving around. And like I said, this is for the week 1 depth chart. So this could change even in week 2. And we've heard from the coaches numerous times this season or this offseason that this team probably won't really be ironed out until even the first bye week. So don't get too caught up in the sauce here if you're a River Peppers fan. I am as well. And this doesn't mean that there can't be any packages where River Peppers comes out and his sole purpose is to catch a pass out of the backfield or to satisfy one specific need, right? Like, that doesn't mean that can't happen, right? I imagine a lot of guys will see plays and formations where they're out there throughout the course of the game. They're just not listed at 1, 2, and then that or at 3, like Carson Hansen, Abusama the third, and Dylan Lee and Aiden Flora are for running back. I think this is probably the right call. I think based on what we saw last year, Carson Hansen going to be a really good running back. And I think we feed him the ball a lot this season, but that doesn't mean we can just forget about Abusama, right? Like, I think he has a very high ceiling as well. We've obviously heard numerous coaches talk highly on these running backs and how they run downhill, they get vertical. I'm excited to see the running game really kind of explode for Iowa State this season. I think part of that will be you don't have your Higgins, your Knoll from last season. You're going to be missing what was like 2,300 yards in two guys. So that's gonna bump up the running back production, I would imagine, on some level, but probably not going to be 100% running backs, if I had to guess. Let's just clear that up. I want to make that very clear. And the reason I say that is because I think tight ends are also going to be a very, very large portion of this offense. I think that's a fair assumption to make. Excuse me, based on obviously the dip in or the loss of production at wide receiver. That's feels like a given to me, especially when you base it off of what the production looked like last year. Right now, the list for tight end goes Benjamin Bramer or Gabe Burkle at 1, Cooper Alexander listed, then they're at 2. Now, that Cooper Alexander, a name that we have talked about over and over and over. At least me personally, a guy that I'm super, super excited about. I think that's a guy that can absolutely blow up this season. We'll have to see. Obviously, we don't really have a whole lot to go off of here, but a guy to look out for, Bramer or Burkle. I think Bramer can be a really good option for Rocco this season. Burkle obviously stepped up last season as well. I wouldn't sleep on these tight ends at all. 6'7", 255 for Bramer. That's a huge frame for Rocco to target. And Burkle only an inch shorter at almost the exact same height, listed at the exact same height, 255. So do not sleep on these tight ends. Like I said, I think that the running backs will probably see over the aggregate, over the season, probably slightly more production than last year, but that does not mean that we're not going to pass the ball. I think that the tight ends will see a lot of action this coming season. I don't disagree with that tight end list at all. I think that that's pretty in line with what we've been talking about. Tyler Moore, another name that's made it onto the tight end list, just not listed in the top 3 here, especially when you've got a tie at 1. Seems like we've got some really good tight ends. Let's switch over to wide receiver. This is split into an F, X, and a Z. So I'll read the F first, and it's a split between Eli Green and Xavier Townsend, 2 guys that we've talked a lot about. Then at the X, we've got Dominic Overby and Chase Sowell, and it's an or. That's why I slipped up on that one. Dominic Overby or Chase Sowell. So 2 very big names there. And that wide receiver Z, Jiminy. We got Brett Eskelson or Carson Brown. Now, Carson Brown, a name that we haven't really heard as much, maybe a guy to look out for. But Daniel Jackson comes in at that kind of really the only one that's not listed as a portion of an or. Maybe worth mentioning that he made that list, but it is at the Z position. So maybe also worth noting. I think that this is pretty much on par with what we've heard from the wide receivers. If anything, this sorts them into semi-groups, but what does that really mean? I think that these were the kind of the 5 or 6 that were at the top of the wide receiver room, right? Eli Green, a guy that I thought we should be looking out for. You got your 2 transfers, and Xavier Townsend and Chase Sowell, and then Dominic Overby, Brett Eskelson, guys that came up quite consistently during this offseason. How will these guys be utilized? How much production will each one kind of be expected to produce? We don't know the answer. If I had to guess, right now, I'm just looking at this, trying to figure out if there's a reason that, they're listed in the way that they are. I'm not exactly sure, to be completely honest. I was going to guess maybe on seniority, potentially. That's probably what it is. But Carson Brown and Brett Eskelson then should probably be flipped. So there maybe is some worth reading into. I'm not entirely sure on that. I'm not going to get too far into this either because I don't think it's that deep. But I would imagine that Xavier Townsend will be moved around the field quite a bit. I would imagine that Chase Sowell will see his fair share of targets as well. So I think that the wide receivers are going to produce quite a bit as well this year. Obviously, that makes complete sense. We're going to get into the line, and then we'll switch over to the defense. But we're going to do that coming up right here after this. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. I am super, super excited to see what Joe Burrow and the Bengals can do this upcoming season. And Aaron Rodgers on a new team, that's definitely worth looking into. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. Run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether it's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My personal favorite flavor, as I've said, is the orange. Tastes just like Tang to me, and drinking these right away in the morning genuinely changes my day. I have noticed when I have stopped drinking these in the morning. It's so real. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners, 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now while it's really stinking hot here in Iowa. Let's break down the defensive side of this depth chart for Iowa State here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Right after we talk about the offensive line, a position that has had a lot of uncertainty, I feel like, and I'll just go through these starters really quickly. At left tackle, it's James Neal III listed right now. That's just how this looks at this very current moment. You've got at left guard, Trevor Burr. At center, it is a 3-way tie still. Dylan Barrett, Brendan Black, or Jim Boniface there at center. At the right guard position, it's Brendan Black or Dylan Barrett. And then at the right tackle position, Tyler Miller is more than likely the starter. That's how he is listed. So that's kind of what we heard. It was pretty consistent with what we know. The center position is really shaping up to be a tight race. 3 very good players. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably going to be Boniface. Maybe not, obviously, but I think just based on what we'll do with the right guard position, we've got Black or Barrett that can fill that hole, So my guess is that they will put Boniface in at center, and then it'll be a battle between Black and Barrett at right guard. Now, is that the right play? Not necessarily, because obviously the center position is extremely important, and just picking the guy that gives you the best option or at least choice of options at right guard to play center doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? You want to have your best player playing center. If worse comes to worse, maybe just pushes Boniface out of the, basically the running to be a starter, and then the winner between Barrett and Black ends up at guard, right? Like that might end up happening. We're not entirely sure here. That's my guess. I'm going to throw that out there, right? Let's get a little crazy with it. That being said, let's switch over to defense. I'm just going to kind of fire through these, and I'll give you my reaction as we go. At defensive end, Tamatoa McDonough coming in as the starter there. And this goes, I believe, basically across the line, because we've got DE. This is essentially DE1. Then we've got nose guard, defensive tackle, DE2. So these, semi 4-man front is kind of how I'm reading this. But this is, Iowa State generally runs a 3-man front. To my knowledge, the way that I know how to count, not very good at that, though. Let's just throw that out there. Nose guard, we got Dom Orange at the starter there. Kamari Moore backing him up. I should mention Fontre Malone listed as the backup to Tamatoa McDonough. Definitely worth noting there. Zamir Hawk, your starting defensive tackle, and Elijah Carnell backing him up. And then at the other defensive end listed is Ike Iziogu, and then Jace Gilbert backing him up. My takeaway from this is not necessarily who is where, what position, who is starting. My takeaway from this is our defensive line should be really freaking good. Like, it should be stinking unbelievable based on what we've heard all offseason. All of these names are familiar. And I know that familiarity doesn't necessarily equate to on-the-field success. But, it feels like it's always been like, hey, look out. We're not exactly sure what Tomato McDonough's going to do, but he's an athletic specimen. Look out for Vontae Malone. Dom Orange, maybe the guy who has gotten kind of the most flack just because of what happened last season and how they're trying to kind of view him this year or what they're trying to mold him into. But obviously a very, very good player in Dom Orange. Kamari Moore, a guy that's constantly being talked about. Hawk kind of popped up more late in the offseason, in my opinion. Ike, a guy that has been talked about repeatedly, a little bit of a sleeper, I thought. But even, I believe it was Dom Orange at Big 12 Media Days that was like, look out for Ike. Like, that dude's a player. So my takeaway is that this defensive line effectively is deep and talented. Now, we'll see how well it translates. And we'll see how much of that translates to sacks, obviously. We'll see if that's even important to Iowa State. I understand there were some comments about that. I still think it's worth like mentioning, but maybe it is just some gamesmanship in there. Nonetheless, I do think that this defensive line is going to be good. I do. And I can eat my words on that. I might be wrong, but I do think that they are going places, which is exciting. Now, the linebacker, boy. We've got some linebackers on this team. Not as many oars at the linebacker position as I thought there would have been. Caleb Bacon, Cooper Ebel, Will McLaughlin, basically your starters here. And then it looks like Zachary Lovett, Cale Brazina, and then Carson Willick or Bo Goodwin are your backups. Kind of the way that this lies out, if you will. Really, that just comes down to how good this team is at the linebacker, even more so than the defensive line. A lot of guys obviously coming back from injury last season. Will McLaughlin, Carson Willick, Caleb Bacon, the guys, Zach Lovett, like guys that I think are going to have massive impacts on the game, just super deep at linebacker. That's exciting. That is probably the position that I am most excited to see this season and to see the kind of impact that they'll have. And guess what? We're not saying this season like, oh, look forward to that in 2 months. It's less than 5 days away. So I am beyond excited to watch these guys play. That's really how I'm going to leave it. I think that shook out basically about how I thought it would with Caleb Bacon, Ebel, and McLaughlin effectively being your starters there. At this star position, we've got Marcus Neal, your starter, and Drew Surges backing him up, two absolute studs as well. Safety and corner, Patton and Cooper, your two safeties, free and strong respectively. And then backing them up is Tayshawn James, backing up James Patton. And KCC, Cummings Coleman, going to be your backup, or Carson Van Dinter backing up Jeremiah Cooper there. Kaijon Cummings Coleman, I should say. At corner, it's going to be Jontez Williams starting along with Trey Bell or Quentin Taylor Jr. Those are two guys that have been spoken of very highly this offseason. Jontez Williams, obviously kind of the guy, but Trey Bell in there as well. Quentin Taylor, we'll see exactly if it's going to be Trey or Quentin Taylor across from Jontez, but I think that's really strong in the secondary as well. Benny Ngoye working his way up to second or third with Eddie Lemos at the other corner position. Look, a lot of names thrown at you. Okay, I completely understand that. That's what this depth chart is. Okay, it's a lot of names. Takeaways, this team is going to be really good. And if they're not, I'm okay with being wrong. I genuinely don't see a way that this team doesn't get to 7 wins. And I think 8 is their floor. And I just said the other day with I believe it was the shift at BYU that I brought this up. The shift at BYU, I should be very clear on that's what I said. I think their ceiling becomes, or the floor becomes 9. So this team looks deep. This team looks athletic, fast, experienced. I don't see any reason they don't get to 9 wins. Genuinely, like running through that, I am just excited. I'm really not nervous about any of those positions, to be honest. From what we've heard this whole offseason, as far as like guys to look out for, guys and what they're doing and how they're feeling, and really obviously the injury situation as well, like guys returning from injury and just how the team feels at this point. I mean, there might be a little bit of growing pains early. Like, yeah, it's week 1 or week 0 even, and then up through week 4. Like, it's a tough start to the schedule, and Iowa State has to find a way to battle through that. but I think they have the guys to do it. And I think they have the coaches to do it. I think they have the returning coordinators to do it. I feel very, 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 very good about this team. So good for a lot of different reasons. To me, it's just plain as day. This team is going to be really good. Team to look out for, a team that is definitely going to be in contention come the end of the season. Like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, man. I'm getting so pumped up. I can't believe the season is here. It's literally days away. Days away. I cannot believe it. It's got me pumped up thinking about the end of the season. However, our very own at Locked On Big 12, Drake Toll, released some end of season predictions and just pretty much straight up disrespected Iowa State. So we're going to talk about that coming up here right in a second. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly, and the AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so I never miss a customer again. Pretty good, not gonna lie. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So my vibes were really high there at the end of that last segment here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Genuinely started getting goosebumps, started getting pumped up, thinking about the fall weather, thinking about Iowa State football finally back out on the field. Like, you can hear it, I feel like, in my voice because I start to like tense up. Genuinely super, super excited about this season. But if it's anything like how Locked On Big 12 host Drake Toll thinks it's going to go, if it goes that way at all, I don't think I'm going to be thrilled. I will be happy based on the kind of expectations I set for this team on some level, but I don't think I'm going to be as pumped up as I am in this moment when we are currently undefeated. This is an unreal prediction. I think this is just so unreal, so inaccurate is how I'm going to put it. And yes, Drake, if you are listening, I mean it. This is terrible. I don't see how this plays out even 60% correctly. Let's just go from top to bottom, and then we will talk kind of about records and where Iowa State lands. Because, boy, the way Drake sees this season playing out is that Texas Tech meets BYU in Arlington. Texas Tech finishes 11-1, BYU 10-2. So the 1-2 pretty cut and dry there. Utah follows BYU up. Kansas State finishes 4th. Arizona State at 5. Baylor finishes 6th. Okay. Houston 7. Even okay. Wow. West Virginia 8. TCU 9. Kansas 10. Iowa State comes in at 11. Pause for dramatic effect. Oklahoma State comes in at 12. Colorado 13. Cincy 14. Arizona 15. UCF 16. His predictions: win-loss for Iowa State 7-5. Okay. I mean, I did say 7 wins is probably right around that expectation meter for Matt Campbell. I believe that was yesterday I was talking about that. Doesn't mean that that's a good year for Iowa State. That's just like okay, you're keeping the team afloat like type of year. I think that the potential that this team has, we just talked about with the depth chart, definitely need to be higher than 7 wins. Need to be higher than 7 wins. I don't know if this is supposed to be some sort of realistic prediction where he's harsher on some teams than others. It is from Locked On Big 12, and I will say it. Of course, he's got BYU at 2. I'm okay with saying that. Not really too shocked by that. Coming from this account, I am shocked that if anyone else did that, I say I would be shocked. Texas Tech at 1, very surprising. I don't see a lot of predictions putting TTU at 1. I think they're probably closer to that 3-4 range. Kansas State falling in there, I don't think that's necessarily super wrong. I think that they're very much in that caliber of 4-1. That is very much where Kansas State is. I wouldn't want to see them slip much below that. That's a big, bold prediction on Arizona State to have them going 9-3. He does have 4 teams going 9-3: Utah, Kansas State, Arizona State, and Baylor. I'm assuming that there are some tiebreakers in there that put them in that order. So that is worth mentioning. Houston 8-4, all the way down to Kansas 8-4. Iowa State comes in at 7-5, as I said, and they are the only 7-5 team in the conference. I just don't see this necessarily being the case unless things really fall apart for Iowa State, especially early. We've talked about the schedule quite a few times. I think that if Iowa State were to go 7-5, it would likely be a scenario where they do fall to Kansas State week 1. They probably would have to lose to Iowa in that case at home. So there is that portion there. I don't think that will happen. I don't think Iowa State will lose either of the games before or after Iowa. I don't think that'll happen. So then they have to accumulate 3 more losses throughout the season. Based on these rankings, then it's probably BYU and Arizona State. I would guess maybe TCU as a team that I do think is sneaky, and they are in this rated higher than Iowa State. I'm just going to say, like, if you disagree, let me know in the comments or at Nick_Marv on Twitter. I just think this is like blatantly wrong, just like genuinely incorrect. If you put these teams at the current ranking they are, I do think Iowa State comes in that clump of 9-3. I think they get 2 more wins than they are allowed. I think their ceiling is up around that 10 wins, so they could come just shy of the Big 12 championship game if the other teams were to play out exactly as they are in this model. I just don't see Texas Tech being that dominant at 11-1. BYU being 10-2. We kind of ran through that. I think they're going to they do have a relatively easy start to the season. And if it is Bear Bachmeier that's running the quarterback position there, like, you got to assume that there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. That feels really bold to me. Utah, a lot of people talking about Utah. I just don't see it. So I just the only team on here that I can truly respect is probably West Virginia, because nobody, I don't feel like, knows what West Virginia is going to be this year. My personal opinion, they are a complete wild card. So I can't argue with West Virginia. I've been on the record saying that many times this offseason, that they could go 9-3 or they could go 2-10. Like, I just don't know what to expect from them. You'll have to go listen to Mountaineer Paul talk about them, because I know he's breaking it down in detail. I'm not entirely sure. Like, even listening to Paul, like, I'm not entirely certain where they'll fall. TCU, I think, is a team that can easily go 8-4. So I'm not too upset with them being 8-4. Obviously, I think Iowa State would be ahead of them. Baylor, probably around the 8-4 mark for me. I'm not going to go through and do every single team. I just think that Iowa State is ahead of a lot of these teams. In my predictions, I would say that Iowa State is ahead of probably TCU, probably Baylor. I'd say definitely Houston. Not really sure what's going on there. Arizona State kind of depends on the year that they have. I think that this model predicts Iowa State having a bad year, essentially, is what he went with. And that's okay if that's his prediction. It's wrong, but that is an opinion or a trajectory that you can take Iowa State having. I can't argue that like couldn't happen. There is a world, some alternate universe out there, some parallel timeline where Iowa State doesn't win a single game this year. It's only one timeline out of the trillions that exist, but there is one. So technically 7-5, it's just how good he picked Iowa State to be this year. I think he's flat out wrong about that. I do. And I made it a whole segment on here just in case he decides to come over to Locked On Cyclones, hits the subscribe button, helps us prove it's a Cyclone State, listens, and is like, okay, we're not messing with the Cyclones this season. I think just based on that depth chart, just no way. There is just literally no way that Iowa State falls to 11th in the Big 12 this season. I think they're absolutely looking at a top 5 finish and going to be pushing for that Big 12 championship game. I can't wait for it. I'm so excited, man. I am so pumped up. Football is back. Football is so here. It's game week. It is game week. Playing over in Dublin, 11 a.m. Saturday. Get ready. This is not a drill. Like, you need to put your big boy pants on because it's go time. It is go time. So excited. Be sure to hit subscribe down below. It's completely free. We're getting geared up for this football season, and you guys are helping us move to 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate you all. That being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, stay safe out there. Football season, like I said, we got to watch literally every single snap. Sayonara.